All right, so we are live on YouTube and Twitter, and I'm gonna go click that go live button on Instagram as soon as it lets me do that. It's so weird that it makes me do it another button, but whatever.
Yeah, it's
Uh, and we got some folks in here already. Hello, folks. Thanks for watching. Thanks for being in here. If you're here, go ahead and say hi in the chat. Would love to say hi back. So, all right, we should live on Instagram too. Hello, 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 my friends. Thank you for joining me. I'm Nicholas W. Fuller, and this is Person Behind the Pages, the show where we get to know the creators that make the things we love. Tonight, I'm joined by Sheriff Joe Rixman. How you doing, Joe?
I'm good. How are you doing, Nicholas?
I'm doing very good. Thanks for being here.
Well, thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Yeah, I was looking for another guest a while back, and I saw you on Twitter, and I thought you had kind of an interesting background and an interesting dynamic, and I wanted to get to know you better. So here we are.
I appreciate that. I'm surprised you even wanted to talk to me because I can get really political and nasty on Twitter. I try not to, but
Like I kind of like I fight that urge sometimes.
yeah.
I like in the 2016 election cycle, I was very political for like a lot, and I think I probably turned off some people on like my Facebook, you know.
It
But
happens.
now I'm like not saying much of anything, which is probably not really helpful because it's probably a time where I should,
Well,
But
and I think my problem with this is that I really should have like a separate Twitter handle
right,
for politics versus my Twitter handle for writing. I already got kicked off of Twitter once for my politics, so I'm like, oh, and I
right.
made it for writing originally, and for some horrible reason, I got back into politics again. I'm like, I have
Right.
to try to separate the two, but oh well.
Yeah, it's tricky. It's tricky.
It is.
It's like, yeah, I don't necessarily want to turn people off, but I also want to kind of have an opinion. But
Right.
well, enough about that for tonight. Good evening, Bo. How you doing?
Hey,
Good to
Bo,
see
good
you
to see you.
guys. Joe, thanks for thanks for hanging out with us tonight. Two, thanks for giving us both a chance to be in Grim Dwarf magazine. That was pretty fun, man.
Absolutely. Right on.
I got it. I went to a baby shower not that long ago, and kind of a older acquaintance, a guy I've known for a while. He was with a girl that he had just started dating her when I moved away. So like we I didn't know this girl, but we were chatting as you do in a baby shower like this, right? And turns out she's like a sci-fi fantasy nerd too, and I was like, oh really, and then like she's like, oh, and you write, and like, yeah. And my wife was like, he has a short story published in that magazine. I was like,
Brilliant.
yes I do, yes I do. So thank you, Joe. Thank you, Joe Byrne, for giving me that opportunity. Um
Both of
but,
us.
right, but yeah, so Joe Rixman, why don't you tell our audience a little bit about you? I mean, you've got a little bit of an eclectic background, both in kind of your normal day job life and also in your creative work that you're trying to lean more and more into, I think, right?
Right. It all started back in the day. I've always wanted to tell stories. I've always been kind of a writer and a reader. My mom got me into reading a lot. My dad got me to science fiction and military stuff. Westerns didn't have the hold on me that my dad wanted it to have, but yeah. Um, but it got me to joining in the military, and I got to travel around the world for a while. Until I realized what I really wanted to do was direct. So I left the military and went to Hollywood, worked in Hollywood for a short time, realized that that was really not the place for me. I knew that, I was in a room, I worked for a company called Morgan Creek back in the day when Robin Hood was being made and Young Guns 2 and Ace Ventura, Morgan Creek's heyday, basically. And I was just in the, in the background administrative offices, mailroom clerk, telephone handler, and all that. Got to meet a bunch of great actors and stuff. But I was in a room full of producers, and they asked everybody in the the owner of the company asked everybody what they wanted to do in Hollywood, and everybody to a person except for me said produce. I, of course, had to say I want to direct, and I was gone 2 weeks later. So I think
Oh, wow.
that pretty much
Okay.
for my Hollywood career. Um, but I've been enamored with movies ever since I was a little kid, and the power that they have. So when I write, most of my writing has been described as cinematic.
Nice.
I see it in my head and I write it as I see it.
Mm-hmm.
And I usually have a soundtrack that I've already created for it. So the music that I listen to sets the stage for the emotions that I want to convey in the story or in the scene. Once I left Hollywood, I wrote 14 screenplays over the next few years. None of them produced, but then again, that wasn't a shock. Some of them were pretty dang good. Some of them were not very good at all. And then, I kind of just sat back and wandered around and didn't know what to do for a few years. Until I moved, and I grew up in Los Angeles, California. Moved to San Diego for 14 years, moved to Palm Springs. And in Palm Springs, that's where I discovered probation and parole, working in their admin unit there. And I saw what these probation officers, parole officers did. And I fell in love with it. And so I've been doing that now for 15 years, 7 down in Palm Springs. Then I moved up here to Seattle, Washington, about 9 years ago, and started up within 6 months here. And I've been doing it ever since. It's a job I love and provides me the emotional positivity that I need in life. So that was a good one.
Yeah, that's all right. What a journey. First of all, well, I want to get back to parole and also how you got the name Sheriff Joe. But before we get there, let's take it back. What put you lived? I was born in Whittier, California. You know Whittier?
Okay. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Well,
So
I was born in Hollywood, literally Hollywood.
Okay.
The hospital was called Cedars of Lebanon,
Okay.
which would eventually become Cedars Sinai.
Okay. Yeah. I definitely heard that. Yeah.
The old building that I was actually born in became the giant blue Scientology building. So I think I got away, dodged a bullet with that one, right?
Right. That's funny. Well, small world though. We weren't, yeah,
not very far.
Right. That's neat. But I moved away from Southern California in 2002.
Oh.
But yeah.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
I'm pretty old. I was born in 1965, and I lived in the same house with my mom and dad until I was 21. Moved into the fraternity house at Cal State Northridge for a year before joining the military.
Okay.
And came back and moved to Santa Monica and was in Santa Monica for a couple of years. Went back to San Bernardino to live with my parents while I finished up college. Got my bachelor's degree in philosophy, or as Neil Brooks likes to call it, bullshit artistry. And from there, moved down to San Diego, was there for 14 years, moved up to Palm Springs for 7, and have been here since now for 9 years.
Nice. How do you like Seattle compared? How does it compare for you to Southern California?
People ask me that, and I don't know how to answer it. I love Southern California. I grew up there. It's my home. I kind of got tired of the 120 degree day heat during the summer.
Yeah. In Palm Springs, especially, right?
Right. And so coming up here to Seattle, when I left on February 2nd, it was 80 degrees at 6 in the morning when we drove away. Got up here, it was 57 degrees 2 days later in the middle of the afternoon. So I like it that it's cooler. The thing that surprises me the most is that the color green up here is different than the color green in Southern California. Southern California's green has kind of a layer of dust and dirt over it. Up here, there are so many different shades of green that it is incredible. It is beautiful. 4 seasons. I love it up here.
Yeah.
Now, but
yeah, no, I feel similarly about living in Wilmington, North Carolina now. It's there's 4 seasons, and I'm like, I kind of like this. This is different, but I like that, because after I lived in Southern California, I lived in Central Florida, which also has two seasons. It has summer
Mhm.
and it has way too fucking hot, like,
Right, exactly right, exactly right.
yeah. But yeah, Wilmington's nice because it's a little bit warm. But we got snow one time, and it was just enough powder for my Floridian wife to be like, "Oh my gosh, like it's snowing," and then it was all melted by the afternoon.
I'll
So
tell you, the first time I ever saw it snow
yeah,
was when I was in basic training in 1987. I was down in San Antonio, and that's the first time I ever saw it snow, and I was 21. 20. Yeah, I guess I was turning 22. And then I went from San Antonio up to Boston, and I had to shovel like feet of snow
yeah.
at that point. So I'm like, but I love Boston. That's another city I really, really love.
That's one that I want to go hang out in.
Yeah,
So yeah, and taking it back again, I didn't know that you joined the military. I guess I'm assuming you did 4 years.
I did. I was in the U.S. Air Force for 4 years. I was stationed. I went from Lackland, it's San Antonio, up to Fort Meade in Maryland, and
Okay,
then for training. And then I went to Clark Air Base in the Philippines, and I was there for 2 years.
that
Did a
seems like that
variety of
might be
jobs
cool.
there. Oh, it was again, it was beautiful, very hot. I got to experience hurricanes there,
Yeah,
um, and it was fun. I enjoyed it. I really enjoyed my time there. I'm still good friends with several people that I knew in the Philippines. Um, and one of them was a filmmaker friend of mine who actually allowed me the opportunity to write and direct my own short film. He edited
neat.
it for me and got me a producer. So um, it worked out wonderfully, and I couldn't be more happy and more blessed for that.
That's really cool. Was that that short film like available anywhere?
No, it's called The Pact, and I'm very proud of it. It's not very good. Um, I'm very proud of it. It was an attempt at a kind of my version of The Others.
Hmm.
I don't know if you remember that film with Nicole Kidman. It was kind of like that kind of a twisty thing.
Okay.
Um, with that involved serial killers and such, but the experience of actually just directing people,
Yeah.
especially a group of young men in this, it was just so wonderful. It was great.
Yeah. Okay. Good.
Yeah.
For a second, I thought you were gonna say it was not great. I didn't. It turned out I didn't like directing, and I was like, oh no,
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 I
it was good.
loved it. I loved it. I wish, this was back in 2004 when I did the summer of 2004, and I really wish that my copy worked. It's on like a DVD,
Mm, mm.
um, but I don't have any programs that I'm able to transcribe it, and I haven't been able to find anything to transcribe it. I'd love to see it again, just for the hoot, you
Yeah,
know.
sure,
Uh,
sure.
like
I
I said,
remember
yeah.
like back in high school, I like made a couple songs with a little crappy garage band, but like I imagine it's kind of similar because like I listened to it one time, I found my old iPod and it was still on there, and I was like,
Yeah.
like nostalgic, right?
Nice, nice,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
I
Uh,
I created a trailer for another film that I wanted to do that never went anywhere because I just got lazy. But that was fun. That was fun doing it. You know, I-
yeah,
if I was in the position to have lots of money and I could make a movie again, I would love to do it. I'd love to get a bunch of people together, and because it's just such a great experience of teamwork and camaraderie
mhm.
and working with people and creating a vision like that. And hopefully we get to talk about this at some point with Foreshadows. The whole point of getting so many different people together with different strengths and abilities together to work on one project is empowering, and it's wonderful.
Yeah, no, yeah, I love that. I definitely want to talk about that Foreshadows project that you did. That's really cool. Um, I want to talk more about kind of directing and kind of your cinematic writing and how it relates to the novel writing and that sort of thing.
Okay.
Um, but yeah, I'm gonna leave those hanging as a teaser for my audience, and
All right. Perfect.
uh, uh, I want to like just kind of like sort of some final thoughts on kind of your own personal history. One, how did sort of the name Sheriff Joe come to be? Like, have you been a deputy sheriff? Is that the parole work that you did? And then also, like, you mentioned that the work as it's parole officer. All right, for a second I thought I was saying it wrong, but no, parole officer.
Cool,
Yeah. You've said it's sort of really like emotionally fulfilling, and I'd love to sort of hear a little bit more about that because I think that's really fascinating.
Okay, well, the Sheriff Joe moniker, it has nothing to do with my profession. In fact,
Oh, really?
Back in the day, like in the mid 1990s, I was the moderator on a website for a site called Film Score Monthly. Another one of my passions is movie music, film music.
Nice.
And so
in the mid 90s.
Yeah, mid 90s till about early 2000s.
That's what's up, man. That's early internet days.
It is.
Yeah.
It is. But they had a website. They had a message board, and I was able to actually moderate for them. And part of that because I cracked down on people that attacked other people for having an opinion about something, and would kick them off sometimes. I got the name sheriff I was the sheriff. And so I'm like, okay, Sheriff Joe, that works for me.
I love it.
And then I just kept it. It's easy to type as a screen name.
Yeah.
That was my original screen name on Twitter before I got kicked off of Twitter, and then had to come back with a different email and a different moniker. So that became Seattle Writer, for obvious reasons. And but with the Sheriff Joe thing, it's kind of convenient that I'm a probation parole officer. I was a sworn deputy for California, and I'm a sworn officer up here. So it worked.
Yeah. That's I love that. That's the origin. Is like, you were sheriff on message boards back in the 90s, and that's how you're gonna be.
Right. I was the big man on campus back then. Wow.
That's pretty cool, man. I mean, and it's like, kudos to you, because online communities don't work well without that sort of moderation. And similar shout out to Bo Kelly in the chat. Are you on the SFF Insiders Discord, Joe?
I might be.
Yeah. All right. Fair.
I have such a hard time with all of these different programs trying to find time to do anything. I'm on several people's Discords. I'm on Ryan Cahill's Discord.
Yep.
Michael Mitchell's Discord. Kian Arland's, you name it, R. Verdes, you name it, I'm on it. But I don't spend a lot of time there. I try to, and then I get distracted. I've got OCD, so I get focused on something and nothing else exists. So I forget that I actually even have Discord. Which makes me sad, because there's so many wonderful opportunities and people in the community that are on Discord that keep up with all that. And I've had some really great conversations there. I've done some read-alongs as well. But so to answer your question, yes, I am on the SSF Science Fiction Fantasy Discord. I don't participate as much as I'd like.
Yeah. No, I get that. Yeah, and it's tough to kind of keep up with, and not to mention too, like, not only the different communities in Discord, but also like there's Twitter, and then there's Instagram, and like book talk is a thing that some people engage in. Yeah.
I have not done the TikTok thing. That's one thing. That's where I draw the line. No talk for me.
It's fun, like, you're not the only one that I've heard that from, but then at the same time, I know people that are like having quite a bit of success there, like talking about their books and that sort of thing. And I'm like, well, someday, but today's not the day.
But I agree. I've heard the same thing. I heard it's a great place to prop up your work and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Like you said, someday, not today.
Yeah. Keep up with all. Yeah, exactly. Keeping up with all of it is like a second full-time job. And then there's less time for the writing, which is also kind of a thing that we want to do, like, so it's tough.
Well, there's the day job. There's reading. There's writing.
Yeah.
How people read 50 books a month just blows me away. I can barely get through 2. And I love to read, but my
Yeah.
goodness, it's just crazy.
Right? Yeah, no, there's this writer, Andy Pelequin, and like I
Oh yeah,
follow him on Instagram now, and like
mhm.
every day the man's like reading another book. I'm like, how do you do this? You know?
And right, he's a prolific author as well.
Yeah. Yes,
So,
absolutely.
yeah, where do you find the time? Do you sleep?
I think he must have like a separate processor in his head that just like deals with words at speeds that we
Mm,
can't, those of us with only one regular brain can't begin to comprehend him with a word processor unit in his, yeah.
yeah,
That's the only explanation that makes sense
I
to me.
suspect clone technology myself, but
Yeah, yeah, fair. Yeah, maybe he might be part Borg, he might be a clone, maybe, but who knows? Who knows?
oh,
Yeah, yeah,
great.
yeah. All right. So let's talk about some of your creative works because you've done some neat stuff, man. Like you've worked on the Star Trek Adventure tabletop RPG. We kind of mentioned this Four Shadows project. You also wrote for EVE Online. What's kind of the timeline of some of these works? Like, how did they kind of come into being?
Okay, so it really all started off with um, writing screenplays and then getting on various. I think it was Facebook at the time I was on, and just messaging authors that I admired who were writing tie-in novels for the Forgotten Realms, which is a D&D or
Hmm.
tabletop game. And I spoke with Paul Kemp, who wrote some really amazing novels and has gone on to write other novels not in that world, and another author by the name of um, oh my God, I'm blanking out here. Jess Hartley. Jess Hartley, a wonderful author who lives right down the road from me in Portland. And I was talking to her, and some of the authors that she knew, she was writing for at that time Vampire, the Masquerade
Hmm.
tabletop, and I'd started reading some of those books and just fell in love with that world. And I was telling her that I was writing and I was doing a bunch of stuff, and I showed her some of my early work, and why she just didn't stop talking to me at that point, I don't know, because my early work isn't great at all. But she suggested she suggested me to another individual who lives again down in Portland, Joe. And again, I'm blanking on his last name, but I spoke with him. He was a developer for Vampire, the Requiem at that time, and they were starting up on something new. So I started working with him on a project called Immortal Sinners, and then various production things happened, and I got transferred to Matt McFarlane, who was developing two books for Vampire the Masquerade called Ancient Mysteries and Ancient Bloodlines. And it was basically going back in time to various moments in history that were, explosive moments in time. I ended up taking ancient Egypt, but it goes all the way up through World War One and creating vampires that were not a part of their brand vampire clans at the time, creating new ones and histories for that. Um, so those were the two books that I worked on with Vampire. And again, Matt McFarlane was an amazing developer and provided a great learning experience and environment for me. I worked with other pretty big name authors in the industry, Chuck Wendig, who has written some pretty big books out there in fantasy sci-fi land. Um,
Right.
he was working on the project with me. He probably wouldn't remember who I am now, and that's okay because he's big and I'm not. But he's gone on and written for Star Wars and such. So
Yeah.
awesome, awesome author. Um, and from there, what happened was that okay, CC.
You should still, even though you said that he probably wouldn't remember, boy, like when you finish a novel, I would totally like send him a copy and be like, you know,
That would be cool. That would be
right?
cool. I'd even autograph and say to the guy you don't remember.
Yeah, but I do. I remember working with you back on this, and like now I've got this, and I thought you'd enjoy it. Boom, who
Exactly.
knows? You'd have
But
nothing to lose, but
I don't. And
yeah,
here's the thing. I believe in appreciation and thanking the people
Yes.
that got me my breaks. And
Right.
uh, Jess and Joe and Matt were all very much responsible for that. And for the time that it was a company called White Wolf. Uh,
Hmm.
White Wolf was then bought out by CCP, who
Okay.
owned the
Okay.
EVE Online property at the
Right.
time. So EVE Online purchased White Wolf, and they were going to do something. I think at that point in time, they were thinking about creating an MMORPG for Vampire.
Right.
So that was exciting. But what ended up happening was that I ended up getting tossed to a developer for EVE Online,
Yeah.
and then writing some what they call epic arcs,
Mm.
basically RPG missions, not NPC missions for their pirate factions. And I wrote 2 epic arcs for each of 2 different factions. And then CCP was no longer doing anything with EVE Online. They got somebody hired them out or something. There was
Oh, really?
there, and so they ended up not doing those epic arcs, which was really
Lame.
sad because that was so much fun. I still play Eve. I love that game. It's a great science fiction sandbox.
Yeah, so yeah, yeah, interested to talk to you about Eve because I played the game a little bit when like around release,
Mhm.
um, and I kind of enjoyed it, but also kind of not.
Yeah. Oh,
Like, I think like I mean the people that like it love that game, right?
right, right.
Um, but
The
it's
learning curve is insane.
right,
It's an incredibly steep learning curve.
and it's
Uh,
also like I mean at least at like the early days, it very heavily like rewarded like early adopters and lots. Well, not necessarily time engagement because the skill mechanic, like you didn't have to like grind, but you just had to set your skills to start training.
right,
But if you were like, if you made sure that you were up at 2 a.m. or whatever when this one skill stopped and you could start another one, then you could kind of be always training something, right?
correct. And it trained in real time. So even
Yes.
if you weren't logged into Eve, you still kept training. So if
Right.
you stopped training and it was like 3 in the morning and you sleep until 8 or 9 in the morning, then that would be 6 hours you weren't training. It was lost time. So you'd have to set up a schedule, which they have now, that you can actually train 3, 4 months in advance.
Wow.
So it's pretty incredible.
Yeah,
Um,
I know that, like, I mean, you know, as the games evolve, they've done some different things to make it a little bit more friendly and also make it so that you can have some hope of kind of like not necessarily catching up, but at least sort of like finding a little bit of a level playing field if you specialize, you know?
Right. And the thing about Eve is it is primarily geared to people who like PvP, player versus player.
Right.
Um,
Right.
and I just don't do that for a couple reasons. One,
Yeah.
I'm extremely competitive,
Oh, yeah.
and
Okay.
I hate to lose.
Uh-huh.
And I like the game so much that if I put myself in the position of being competitive and losing, I'd stop playing.
Yeah.
So I was like, no, I'm just going to do the, the player versus world stuff and do the NPC stuff
Okay.
and build my corporations and do the missions and stuff like that. So I'd have to kill people, and I'm happy.
There you go. Okay.
It's happiness for me.
And the game, like these days, it's sort of set up in a way that accommodates that well, and there's like enough content that it's still engaging.
Mm, I'm going to have to say a no to that, and
Fair, fair.
I have actually been pondering just canceling my subscription to it for now, just because first of all, I have a subscription. I have 2 subscriptions to the Broken Binding now, so that's kind of eating my monthly income.
Play money. Yeah, 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 yeah,
So,
yeah.
so it's like, well, can I afford another $20 a month to
Yeah.
just spin in my station for 30 seconds before I log off again?
Yeah, right. Yeah, yeah, yeah. I tell you, one thing that game has going for it is it's so pretty.
It's beautiful.
Right.
And the best part of this is that it is a worldwide community.
Yes.
You can actually meet people from China, Russia, South America, anywhere in Europe, and you can belong in corporations that incorporate people from all over the world and with
Yeah.
different cultures and learn stuff and play with them and see how things work out. Um, I was never much of a technological kind of person, so trying to figure out how to get the camera and the mic to work. This is a miraculous thing that I haven't enjoyed this. I kind of feel like Harry Dresden sometimes. Getting near any kind of mechanical device causes it to explode.
That's funny.
That's kind of me.
That's funny. And yeah, yeah. Well, but hey, it's working out. So we must have some magic. I guess
Yeah,
it's
knock
working
on
out.
wood.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Are you so? I mean, granted that you kind of play the PVE and that sort of thing, and you sort of it sounds like you play your own game, but given that you kind of did right with it, you've been kind of a member of the community for a while. Are you familiar with this sort of history thing that happened with Eve some time ago? But like someone or multiple someone's, I think, infiltrated a rival
Oh,
corporation,
yeah.
and they had this huge, where they essentially like took over the corporation and
Right.
liquidated all of their assets.
That's part of the thing. Okay, so when I did PvP for Eve, I was in a group that I actually met at Eve convention in Las Vegas. The group is called Battlestars.
Uh-huh.
It was a corporation that was part of an alliance called Goonswarm,
Uh-huh.
and Goonswarm was the big evil baddie of Eve
Mm-hmm.
because their CEO, who was known worldwide as the Matani, was able to get someone in his higher group to be a spy in the other big alliance. And that spy was able to work his way up and get access to all their stuff. And that's what happened. They ended up just taking everything from that alliance, giving it to Goonswarm. And Goonswarm also likes to, pardon my French, shitpost pretty much everybody. Really huge online presence with Reddit, and it would get nasty. I mean, it would get personal and horrible, and some of the stuff was funny as crap, and I just laughed. But it could also be really, really downright cruel.
Mm-hmm.
And I lost interest in Goonswarm after a while because they really didn't care too much. They got more interested in shit posting and their own cruelty than they did playing the game.
Yeah.
Uh,
Sounds like
that
they were bullies.
but I stopped playing E for about 5 years, like in the early to mid aughts of 2000.
Mm-hmm.
So
Mm-hmm. Um, it's crazy. Well, and just to kind of you talk about that event though, if anyone's unfamiliar, again, like this, there's this worldwide game, people playing from all over the world, and then there's this Goon Swarm organization that exists, and they're sort of big, but they spend like I think years getting their spy to infiltrate this other organization, getting the spy to be like high enough in the other organization that he had trust enough that he or she, I really don't know um but they were able to access all of their equipment in the game, and they like gave everything they could to Goon's phone and got rid of everything else. So putting this into context though, like there is a little bit of a like a secondary economy where you can buy some stuff outside of the game for real money. And at the time, I remember it being like the value of all this stuff was something in the neighborhood of like a couple $100,000.
oh yeah, and that was a big deal with Eve. Eve Online used to boast about having its own kind of dedicated economy that
Mm-hmm.
worldwide economists in the real world were studying.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and yeah, you could buy ships and things of that nature for, let's say, $5 or $10 a pop. And we're talking thousands of dollars in real time money for these ships that were taken from the people who bought them and stolen and given to other people. It was just crazy.
Yeah.
And to this day, I think it's never been equaled, but more people are aware that that can happen now. So
Yeah. Okay.
probably much more cautious about giving power to any one person.
Yeah.
That
That's so crazy.
It really is.
Yeah. Um, it's interesting too that you mentioned too that the CCP company, they bought Vampire Requiem, and then they sort of like how did like they I mean, because they're the original developers of Eve, right? And then it sounds like you're saying that they sort of got ousted from Eve.
Well, I don't know what the whole story is with CCP and Eve.
Yeah.
At some point, CCP purchased White Wolf, and all the
Uh-huh.
properties with White Wolf would include Vampire the Requiem,
Uh-huh.
Werewolf, Mage, Prometheus, Changeling, um, and there are a couple others, but every one of the properties for White Wolf went to CCP, and I think the whole point of that was to create an MMORPG that they just couldn't work.
Yeah.
Logistically, the technology just wasn't there to do it the way CCP wanted to do it.
Hmm.
And I don't know if you've played any of the vampire games from White Wolf early on. They were like, pixelated, blocky, not really coherent. I've got real hope that this new one coming out, they're coming out with a new vampire game, I believe next year,
Hmm.
that I think is going to look really good. It's promising. So fingers crossed.
That's cool. That's cool. Well, that's really interesting. Like, so you did the writing for Eve, you did the writing for Vampire. You also wrote a little bit for Star Trek Adventures, another tabletop RPG. So how, and now you're working on novel. You also wrote like some screenplays. How do
Mhm.
these different mediums vary when you're writing the? Well, tell me a little bit about like the stuff that you wrote for games, whether they be tabletop RPG or Eve. Was it more linear or was it more like branching different narratives?
The different thing about writing for games versus say screenplays or short stories or novels, it's just a different language.
Mm-hmm.
Um, for example, writing for the computer, the Eve Online game, there were all kinds of different things that you had to put into. So it didn't feel like I was writing any kind of necessary storyline. I was just putting little patches here of what happened, followed by some coding, then more patches here for the next thing that happens. What are the rewards for that happened? So it was a lot more difficult. I didn't enjoy the experience, but it was a really good learning experience. And I liked it, but it's not something that I would want to do. Gaming was pretty much the same way for me,
Mm-hmm.
in the sense that, well, the best way to putting this was when I write something, I'm writing to images in my head that come across and voices and music that play. So like I said, it's very cinematic. Again,
Mm-hmm.
when I'm writing for tabletop RPGs, there's a certain language you have to write that interrupts the flow of that narrative process. Um, so writing for Vampire, writing for Star Trek, especially Star Trek with the new dice rolling program, the way they run their mechanics, it just was different. Again, that was something I had not had a lot of experience with. So trying to write for it was, again, Jim Johnson, who was the developer for the 2 Star Trek games that I wrote for. Um, he was patient and phenomenal for the work. And again, I have to give any success and any enjoyment that other people get from these games that I've written for, go to the editors and developers, because they took my scribble and my hopes for what it could be and turned it into what it became. And I owe all that to them. Um,
Nice. Nice.
yeah.
Yeah, that's interesting. They also worked on this pretty cool project, this Foreshadows the Ghost of Zero. So I'd love to hear a little bit more about that, and then we'll get into. I'd love to hear a little bit about, the writing that you're doing these days, and the progress that you're making, that sort of thing. Yeah, well,
Okay. Foreshadows, again, that one started because I became friends with a writer for Eberron, which is another branch of gaming, tabletop gaming for Dungeons and Dragons. There's Dragonlance, Forgotten Realms, Dark Sun, and Eberron was one of them, created by Keith Baker. And one of the authors of one of the tie-in novels was Jeff LaSala. And he was part of his various artists group got together, and they were wanting to put together this comprehensive multimedia program. One of the other things that was going on also was that he had an online D&D game that I was a part of called Dark Echelon. And I, along with Brian Matthews, who's a really great horror author, has written a series of books called the Forever Man series. Ken Hart and a few others got together and were playing this game, and we were talking about getting, and I've got the book here. It's called Foreshadows, The Ghost of Zero.
Ta-da!
And how this came about was it initially was, it started off as a bunch of songs created by artists who just got together and put these songs together onto a CD.
Mm-hmm.
And Jeff then gave us authors that he had gotten together a list of the song titles and asked us which connected with us. So I don't know why I got this, because when I write, I listen to pretty much non-verbal songs. It's pretty much film music, film scores. That's what gets me going. But this one song that I heard was called Love Simulacra, and I just connected with the title and the song itself. It was a lovely song. And so I chose that song, and like with the rest of the authors, we wrote our stories based on the song. It could have been the lyrics or the music of the song that inspired them. But we actually had one of the authors of the book is Ed Greenwood, who was the creator of Forgotten Realms, for example. So we just had a fun time with that, and we submitted our stories. And again, thanks to Jeff for editing my story, because again, he helped to make it much better. But
as a good editor does,
as they are wont to do.
Yeah.
And from there, it then went to a group of artists who, and by artists I mean like drawing kind of. And then these artists were then able to create images to go along with each story. Let me see if I can find mine real quick, because it's really cool. My story is it is a future noir. It's a detective noir, and here it is. I don't know if let's see if we can do that there. There we go. Nice.
That's cool.
And so yeah, and it's about this detective who has a secretary who's an android who helps him with all of his computer work, and she ends up falling in love with him and sacrificing. Now, I don't want to get into it. The bottom line is that things happen, and there's a love story there. And it's not exactly a man falls in love with computer or a computer falls in love with man thing. It turns out to be a little different, but
that's exciting.
Little twist. But it was a fun story to write, and it was just to get this and to listen to the music and read the story with the music. Was great. For me, just getting the feedback from first-time readers, and I'm sure all the authors you've interviewed will say the same thing. It is the world.
Right.
You get this positive and even negative feedback. You learn something from negative feedback. For the most part, unless it's this sucks,
All right. Yeah.
But, good, solid feedback. It's so important for writers to have that. And it just made my heart just melt every time I got to see a positive response to something I've written.
When did you guys do this Foreshadows project?
Foreshadows actually came out, 12 years ago, I think.
Wow.
Yeah, it was a while ago, and it went out of print, and I don't know if it's available. I remember a couple months ago, when I was in contact with, I was talking with Gregory Contaxis.
Oh, that. Yeah. I've interviewed him. Yeah.
Yeah, he. I was talking to him, and I purchased his special edition novel from him directly, and
Nice.
he said he wanted to purchase Foreshadows, and so I had to try to find out if he could, and uh, unfortunately, it doesn't seem like, because it's multimedia. I
Yeah.
don't know how that would even work anymore. Um,
Mm,
the copyright on here. I'm looking for the copyright date, and God forbid I should
that's
actually
cool though.
see it, but it was the early aughts. So
Oh, it does look like her by the book plus.
2012, January of 2012. So 12 years, almost 12 and a half years ago, which blows me away. It does not
Right.
seem that long ago.
What? Oh no, that's not.
I
Yeah, I
don't
don't
know.
know. I don't know. Like, I mean, I got the website, but I don't know if there's a place to get it. It's a little unclear. But
Yeah, the website still is there. I
yeah,
don't think you can purchase it anymore.
that's a
But
shame.
if somebody is interested, they can always try to contact um, the the primary producer of this whole project is Jeff's brother John Lasala. Um,
Word.
and
That's pretty neat, though. Like, I love the way that came together. Like, initially there was the music, and then that inspired the stories, and the stories inspired the visual art. And that's really cool.
yeah,
It's really
I've never
cool,
heard of anything like that
right?
exist, even before or since. I know there have been multiple kind of collaborations, and there are always, like with special editions, you've got artists inspired by the work that's been written.
Right.
But I've never seen anything with
Yeah.
the music
Right.
inspiring
Right.
the
Yeah.
writing, inspiring the artwork.
Right. Right. I have yeah, the only thing that like kind of comes to mind with that is I have a friend that wants to write like a few short stories that's inspired by like some of the music of his favorite band. And I think like I'm like, dude, do it. That sounds like such a cool idea. Like I don't, he probably can't really go sell it if it's like incorporating lyrics and that sort of thing, but still like I
Right.
mean I think it'd be a neat piece of like fan fiction that fans of it would dig. But
Absolutely.
yeah.
I've actually written, it's kind of mixed bag here, but I have written a book of short stories that I call Inspired By. And they are pretty much just short stories that were
Oh, cool.
inspired by various tracks of music that I absolutely love and listen to all the time. One of the
That's neat.
novellas I'm writing right now is, in fact, inspired by a song, which is weird for me. But it's inspired by a Frank Sinatra song, and it's my work in progress right now. And I'm really liking that. I'm working with another booktuber by the name of Luke Winch. I don't know if you know him. I was talking to him, and he was wanting to write and have somebody motivate him, and I was wanting somebody to motivate me. And so I'm like, okay, well, let's get together, let's do this. So the first chapter, I've submitted to him my first chapter. I'm ready to go on. So
There you
that,
go. There you
that's
go.
that's fun. Yeah.
You got an accountability buddy.
Yeah, and I need one. Oh my
Yeah.
God. If I try to put my own deadline to something, it never gets done because I got OCD and I get too focused on other things. And
Yeah.
if I have a deadline, boom, I'm on it. I'm there. I love
Yeah.
deadline.
Yeah. Luke Winch?
Luke Winch, yeah. He's
I don't
on
think I know.
Twitter.
All right. I'll have to go check him out.
Yeah.
So tell me more about like are you the kind of person that has a bunch of different works in progress active?
Oh my God. Yeah. Yeah. My reading and writing are kind of similar. For example, with my reading, I've got I am reading The Trials of Ashmount right now from John Palladino.
Okay.
I'm reading Eclipse, which is a sci-fi work from Herman Sternagel. I just
Oh,
got this
nice.
one.
Yeah.
I'm reading Horror Movie, which is the Broken Binding edition. Just got that.
Nice. Nice.
And I'm also reading book 7 of The Expanse every morning. I read one chapter of that every morning. That's my morning coffee wake up reading thing. So with my writing, I've got this novella, which is a fantasy, the novel, which is a sci-fi. I've got another novel that I'm working on, which is the first of what I hope to be a series, but we'll see, which is kind of like a supernatural detective thriller. Not an
Okay.
urban fantasy. This is more police procedural with a supernatural aspect to it. But I have written, when I was writing my screenplays, I had sequels.
Yeah.
I wrote a sequel to Alien. I wrote a sequel to First Wives Club, just to give you an idea. All kinds of different genres at different times, because I think for me that's the only way to learn what works
Yeah.
is to work in the different genres and see what works. I probably wouldn't write a fantasy because not fantasy, a romantasy,
Mm.
just because I've seen so many things that don't work in romantasy, and I don't think I
And
have the chops to do it.
wait, yeah, so many things that don't work, and yet, like,
And
people eat
yeah,
up those books, right?
yeah. One of
Yeah.
my best friends is an audiobook reader
Mm-hmm.
for a very well-known romantic author uh,
Mm-hmm.
for those pulp romances.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and he has a blast doing these things. And I tried reading one of the books, and I'm like, oh, I just
Yeah.
this isn't for me. And
No,
God
that's
bless
okay.
all the
Yeah.
people who are.
Yeah. Yeah. Right. Yeah. 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 Nothing is for everyone, but
Exactly, exactly.
that's good. Yeah, I like that too. I like, especially, and I know you've written shorts before, but that's my favorite place to kind of experiment with different genres too.
Oh, right,
And
exactly.
have you ever heard of NYC Midnight? It's a contest for like flash fiction and short stories and that sort of thing.
I haven't.
So that
I'm
one's
curious.
cool. Hmm?
I'm curious now.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah. So it's neat. Depending on, so they do like a few different contests throughout the year, but like depending on the length of the work that you're doing, you'll
Mhm.
have a limited amount of time. It could be like a week, or it could be like as short as 24 hours, especially in the later stages of the competition,
Yeah,
right? But
yeah,
you'll get
I've heard
li-
something.
so, and then it's due at midnight NYC time. But what's fun about it is that they give you a prompt that includes like a genre, a setting, and well, I guess they can, like, it can vary, but it'll be a combination of three things. In my instances, it was genre, setting, and like an item that had to be included. But I
Mhm.
loved, like, doing it and
Yeah.
doing something that was a little bit different and a little bit challenging. Like one time I had to write like a political satire, which I thought would be, oh, this will be
Wow.
easy, but it actually felt like it was a lot harder than I expected it to be. I think
Right.
probably because I had like just kind of too many ideas swimming around, to be honest.
Sure,
Uh,
sure.
tough to rein it all in a weekend. you know
Well, exactly.
yeah.
As you mentioned that, my friend Terry Lukemeyer, who I mentioned earlier, who was the editor in Cincinnati that I was in the military with, edited my film. He was getting me involved in one of those, I think,
Hmm.
weekend kind of things where he wanted me to write the script, and it had to be like a 4-page script that he could write and direct in 2 days.
Wow.
And then he had to bow out for some reason, so it didn't work. But yeah, there are I yeah, there are certain like flash fiction kind of things like that around.
Yeah.
Um, I don't know why I don't get involved with more of those. Probably because it doesn't occur to me. If I don't see it, it doesn't exist. So
Yeah,
if
right,
it doesn't
sure.
remind me of it, then I'm like on to the next thing that I have to focus on.
Right. Well, so I mean, you got some stuff on your plate right now anyway. You got, yeah. So what like we were talking a little bit beforehand, and you were talking about how kind of one of your works in progress, you finished a draft, but that's book two in the series, right?
Right. Yeah, I wrote a sci-fi. I'm writing a sci-fi series, and the first book I wrote, I completed it and was ready to start editing. And then I just, as is as what happens to me is I end up starting to read, or I see a movie that really gets me excited, and it's a different genre altogether, and then I start trying to focus on the story that could have been in this genre. So I ended up then coming up with the prequel, which is now book 1 of this series, which tells what happened up to book 2, which is completed, but I'm still working on book 1. And I am oh my God, I'm a horrific plotter. I have to have everything plotted down to the detail. And then, well, every chapter has to be plotted in such a way as I know where the chapter starts, what happens in the chapter, how it ends, et cetera, all the way through. I need to know where the plot points are going to be, the midpoints, all that stuff. So I have a detailed map of how to get to where I need to go. Otherwise, I would wander to oblivion, and I'd never get anything done.
Same.
So yeah, I've got book 1, which is going to be more of a spy thriller, political spy thriller that leads to this kind of military sci-fi, which will then lead to a pure sci-fi kind of thing. And then if it goes on, if I live long enough for it to continue moving on, it could, the way it's set up, that I've purposely set it up, is that there could be multiple genres for following books. They could be a horror story, a Western story, a fantasy story, a romantic story, you name it. It could be all of those things, depending on which book it is.
That's cool. That's a fun.
It's fun to think about.
Yeah.
Creating it and making it happen, 2 different things.
Yeah, sure. Well, yeah, that's the secret and the magic, right? Is I remember being interested in game development early in my adult years, and everyone has an idea for a game. Everyone that's played Eve is like, oh, if it was just this, and like they would think that they can go take it to a developer, and it's like, no.
Not how it works.
Yeah, right. Every first of all, your idea is, I doesn't care how good your idea is, it doesn't have value, because what has value, at least for that, which is a very huge and big endeavor, making a game, is the execution, but then also in that sort of creative environment too, every single person that's in that building working on that thing, they also have at least 3 ideas for a game that they think is the best game ever. So you coming in here with just an idea, no, sir, no.
Yeah, and it's the same in Hollywood. Everybody's got an idea, and Hollywood likes to jump on what works. And you can always see it in the sense that, for example, when I was with Morgan Creek and we were doing Robin Hood, Prince of Thieves, there were 2 other Robin Hood projects in development at the exact same time, and they were fighting to get it done. The original script for Robin Hood, Prince of Thieves was much more along the lines of an Indiana Jones type adventure, until they got Kevin Costner, who was just coming off of directing Dances with Wolves, and they got him for a nice $20 million payday, and they thought this is going to be great. They were able to get Christian Slater and Alan Rickman and Morgan Freeman as well for that. But the bottom line was that they beat out the other 2 Robin Hoods, who got, actors who nobody has heard of them since, playing those roles. And then like a year later or 2 years later, Mel Brooks came out with Robin Hood Men in Tights, which was even better. A lot of fun with that one. Making fun of Kevin Costner and everybody. So it was good. That's how Hollywood works. They look for something that everybody's interested in, so that they can all make it at the same time and then beat out the people that aren't fast enough. With novel publishing, publishing is a different monster altogether. Because it can take, with movies, they can probably pump them out within, low budget films can be pumped out in 6 months. A feature film could take 2 to 3 years from beginning to release. And in that time, people change and are no longer interested in what that movie was selling. That's why the best advice I ever got as a screenwriter was never write to what's popular at the time. Because in 2 years, and with the publishing world, that's the same thing. It takes a year or so to get from conception and hiring to out in the bookstores.
Right.
don't write to what's popular now because it's not going to be popular in a year or 2 years.
Right. Yeah,
Right?
I've heard like some indies that are able to write at like Andy Pelican speed. they,
Oh,
they
no.
they they might be able to like chase a trend, but other than that, it's like no, you
Right.
know.
Well, and then you have Brandon Sanderson who creates his own trends,
Yeah,
uh,
true.
and also writes at the speed of light.
Yes.
You've got Ryan Cahill who doesn't have to worry about trends; he just writes what he loves and
Yeah.
writes at the speed of light.
I
And
can't put. Did you see Ryan Cahill like earlier in June? He was like, "Okay, I need to write like 300,000 words or whatever by the end of July." He's like,
Mhm.
"So I'm gonna write, walk my dog, write, have dinner, write, go to bed." And I was like, "Are you serious, dude?" Like,
Yeah.
I guess he's done like 140,000 since he made that post, which like I don't
Yeah,
like.
everybody hates Ryan Kyle, and everybody loves Ryan Kyle for the same reason. Uh,
Yeah,
but
same as Sando, right?
yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
exactly. Ryan's work really is the work that got me excited about writing again. Um,
Nice.
I actually go back to Ronnie Verdi's novel, The First Binding, which was the first broken binding edition I ever got.
Oh,
But
nice.
his book actually got me back into reading fantasy again because I had just stopped reading altogether. I wasn't interested in pretty much anything.
Mm.
And I didn't know how to get back involved in it. And his book just got me excited about reading fantasy again. And
Have you
then
told him that? Like, well, yeah, you're on his Discord. Okay, I bet. Like, that's. I mean, that's the most flattering thing I think you could say to a writer, right?
right, and then I from Ronnie I went to Ryan and read The Fall, which got me so thrilled and excited. I had to just move on to everything else he's written,
Hmm.
which is why I will die on this hill that if you're going to read Ryan Cahill's series, you must start with The Fall. Then
Okay.
go to on Of Blood and Fire. But you can't start with on Of Blood and Fire. You have to start with The Fall. Get yourself pumped and primed and excited about it, and then go into the world building aspect of it.
Fair.
Brilliant,
All right.
brilliant work, brilliant work.
Noted.
Most people will yell at me for that, though.
Uh, Yeah, I haven't read any Ryan stuff yet, so that's I gotta add that to the TBR. I bet.
Please do. You will not regret it.
Yeah, yeah. Well, and Ronnie's I haven't read that yet either, but that's very high on my TBR also. Like I really love The Name of the Wind, but when I read that years ago, and I've heard it's very similar. So if that's the case, it's going to be so much my jam.
And you're right. And that's gotten a lot of press on BookTube and Book Twitter or whatever. I saw a lot of that. Well, First Binding's a lot like Name of the Wind, and the structure of it is similar.
Hmm.
What I like about Ronnie's work is, first of all, I have hope that it'll finish the series.
Yeah, right. Yeah, yeah.
It's inspired by his culture and that mythos, and it is just lovingly done. So you're reading this, and it's not just your typical fantasy.
Yeah.
The characters are just people you absolutely adore, with
Nice.
all their faults, with all their issues, because for me, the cultural impact of that can't go without mention. Um,
Yeah.
Another one, Gustav Moravi, Sons of
Mm,
Darkness. Again,
mm,
another novel that is steeped in that like Indian, uh,
mm-hmm.
Central European
Mm-hmm.
lore and culture. Just beautifully written, lots of fun, good work.
Nice. Nice. Nice.
Indie authors are probably some of the best writing out there right now.
Right.
You look at individuals like Zach Argyle and Andy Peliquin, and even some of the smaller guys. J.S. Diamatti just came out with his series, Stone and Sky, brilliant series. Um, the break-ins. I really want to call them the breakouts because that's what they're doing. They're breaking out into this field and getting their names known and seen and publishing great work. So yeah, I'm not there yet, but I'm enjoying their work and like I said, I'm grateful to the people who got me excited again about this.
I hear you. I feel you. I'm very lucky to be one of the break-ins, but I'm gonna be the last one to come out with a book, and I'm like, I'm gonna be like the break-ins caboose,
If you need any poking or prodding, let me know.
All right, fair enough. Um, all right. Well, Joe, we've been talking for a little bit more than an hour, so I want to wrap things up. This has been lovely. I would love to leave you with one more question.
Okay.
What's been, you've done a lot of different writing. You've done a lot, you've done games, you've done shorts, you're working on novels, you've done the screenplays. What's been like a piece of either advice or just sort of wisdom that has really helped you in your writing, either recently or kind of throughout all the writing you've done?
Um, God, that's a very good question. Recently, I took I got into master class because I wanted to learn more about some of the authors, the big name authors. I got into it for Baldacci and Patterson, and ended up sticking around for Atwood and Gaiman. And the best piece of advice I got was from Neil Gaiman, and it's pretty much just write what you love. We have a responsibility to be honest, and it doesn't have to be honesty in the sense of write what you know, because what's the point of that? Write what you don't know so you can get involved in it and research it. But one of the things I take away, and David Morrell, another one of my favorite authors, David Morrell, Dennis Lehane, Stephen King, those are my big three, along with Neil Gaiman. And again, you'll see 4 completely different genres right there. But they all pretty much say the exact same thing: write honestly. And for me, it's a matter of being honest with your characters, writing characters that are real to you. Because if they're real to you, they're going to be real to the readers. If you're just writing stories, as in plots, just writing about, well, this sounds like a real cool thing to have happened. That's a great way to start a novel or a screenplay, but it's no way to write one that's going to last. It's not going to get the readers excited, because for me, it's the characters. It's the people that inhabit that world. Anderson creates amazing worlds, great magic systems. Wouldn't matter worth a lick if the readers didn't care about the characters that inhabited those worlds.
Right.
For me, I want to, when I read, again, it's a cinematic experience for me. I'm reading about these characters and I am there. I am in the world, living this character's point of view. So if somebody does something that takes me out, I notice it right away. I don't like that. It breaks up the experience. I want to live in this world. The writers have done everything in their power to create it, and they've created a wonderful place to be in. But if the character doesn't feel true, then I'm kind of like, why am I here?
Completely agree.
Write good characters.
No, I think that's so important. It's ultimately it's the characters that we connect with. Even when there's cool plot, I mean, I am generally not interested in like sitcoms on TV, because they're too slice of life, and there's not like high enough stakes for me to get interested. But every once in a while, like my wife was getting me into Scrubs, and I love Scrubs because of the characters, and especially like the dynamic between Turk and JD, that was such a fun friendship to watch. So you gotta.
One of my favorite sitcoms was MASH, for that very same reason. Funny as all get out, but at the end of the day, when I watched that finale, along with like 92 million other people, I was in tears, because I knew that I was never going to see these characters again. These characters that had been part of my life for 13 years growing up when I was a little kid. And they were gone. I would only be able to see them in reruns. Star Trek, same way, really. When Spock died, I was inconsolable. I grew up with this guy, and then he comes back, and I'm all, I knew that was going to happen. It's science fiction, of course.
Right.
So characters are what are our bread and butter.
Yeah.
Without them, then Ocean's 11 would be nowhere near as interesting without
Oh
the
man.
characters inhabiting
Absolutely.
this and doing that really cool thing, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And I know Brandon Sanderson talked about how Mistborn was his homage to that genre, the
Yeah.
heist genre.
Yep.
And yeah, it wouldn't work. That's another reason. Lee Berdugo's Six of Crows, so much fun. Again, love the characters. The characters made that heist believable, and when they were threatened, made it scary.
Yeah. Nice.
Good stuff.
Yeah, I like it, Joe. It's been fun talking with you. Where can folks find and follow you online, Joe?
I am on Twitter under Seattle_writer. I'm on
Mhm.
Facebook under I don't know what, Sheriff Joe, I think, or it could just be my